Host by Louis Satcher. Chapter 30. The next day was Zigzag's birthday, or so he said. Zigzag lay in his coat as everyone had it outside. I get to sleep in because it's my birthday. Then a little while later he cut into the breakfast line just in front of Squid. Squid told to go to the end of the line. Hey, it's my birthday, Zigzag said, staying where he was. It's not your birthday, said Magnet, who was standing behind Squid. It's true, said Zigzag, July 8th. Sandy was behind Magnet. He didn't know what day of the week it was, let alone the date. It could have been July 8th, but how would Zigzag know? He tried to figure out how long he had been at Camp Green Lake, if indeed it was July 8th. I came here on March 24, he said aloud, so that means I've been here 46 days, said Daryl. Stanley was still trying to remember how many days there were in May and June. He looked at Daryl. He had learned not to double him when it came to math. 46 days. It felt more like 1,000. He didn't dig a hole that first day, and he hadn't dug one yet today. That meant he had dug 44 holes. If it really was July 8th. Can I have an extra carton of juice? Zigzag asked Mr. Sir. It's my birthday. To everyone's surprise, Mr. Sir gave it to him. Sandy dug his shovel into the door. Hole number 45. The 45th hole is the hardest, he said to himself. But that really wasn't true, and he knew it. He was a lot stronger than when he first arrived. His body had adjusted somewhat to the heat and harsh conditions. Mr. Sir was no longer depriving him of water after having to get by on less water for a week or so. Sandy now felt like he had all the water he could want. Of course, it helped that Gerald dug some of the hole for him each day, but that wasn't as great as everyone thought it was. He always felt awakened while Daryl was digging his hole, unsure of what to do with himself. Usually he stood around a while before sitting up by himself on the hard ground, with the sun beating down on him. It was better than digging, but not a lot better. When the sun came up a couple of hours later, Stanley looked for the dome of God. The mountains were little more than their shadows on the horizon. He thought he could make out a spot where the top of the mountain seemed to jut upward, but it didn't seem very impressive. For a short time later, the mountains were no longer visible, hidden behind the glare of the sun, reflecting off the dirt. It was possible, he realized, that he was somewhere near where Kate Barlow had robbed his great-grandfather. If that was really the lipstick tube he had found it, then she must have lived somewhere around here. Zero took his turn up before the lunch break. Sandy climbed out of his hole, and Zero climbed down into it. Hey, Cayman, said Zigzag, you should got a wipe. Then if your slave doesn't dig fast enough, you can crack it across his back. He's not my slave, said Zigzag, as Stanley. We have a deal, that's all. A good deal for you, said Zigzag. It was Daryl's idea, not mine. Don't you know, Zig, said X-Ray, coming over here. Heyman's doing Daryl a big favor. Daryl likes to dig holes. He sure is a nice guy to let Daryl dig his hole for him, said Squid. Well, what about me? asked Armpit. I like to dig holes too. Can I dig for you, Cayman? After Daryl's finished, the other boys laughed. No, I want to, said Zigzag. It's my birthday. And he tried his best to ignore them. Zigzag kept at it. Come on, Cayman. Be a pal. Let me dig your hole. Stanley smiled as if it were all a big joke. When Mr. Penensky arrived with water and lunch, Zigzag offered Stanley his place in line. Since you are much better than me, Stanley reminded where he was. I didn't say I was better. You are insulting him, Zig, said X-Ray. Why should Kidman take your place when he deserves to be at the very front? He's better than all of us, aren't you, Caveman? No, said Stanley. Sure you are, said X-Ray. Now come to the front of the line where you belong. That's okay, said Stanley. No, it's not okay, said X-Ray. Get up there, here. Stanley hesitated, then moved in the front of the line. Well, this is a first, Mr. Pendersky said, coming around the side of the trail. He filled Stanley's canteen and handed him a sack lunch. And it was glad to get away. He sat down between his hole and Zero's. He was glad that he had been digging his own hole for the rest of the day. Maybe the other boys would leave him alone. Maybe he shouldn't let Zero dig his hole for his anymore. But he needed to save energy to be a good teacher. He bit into his sandwich, which contained some kind of meat and cheese mixture that came in a can. Just about everything at Camp Green Lake came in a can. A supply truck came once a month. He glanced up to see Zigzag and Squid walking toward him. I'll give you my cookie if you let me dig your hole, said Zigzag. Squid laughed. Here, take my cookie, said Zigzag, holding it out for him. No thanks, said Stanley. Come on, take my cookie, said Zigzag, sticking it in his face. Leave me alone, said Stanley. Please eat my cookie, said Zigzag, holding it under Stanley's nose. Squid laughed. Stanley pushed it away. Zigzag pushed him back. Don't push me. I didn't. Stanley got to his feet. He looked around. Mr. Pendersky was filling Zero's canteen. Zigzag pushed him again. I said, don't push me. And he took a step forward, carefully avoiding Zero's hole. Zigzag kept after him. He shoved Stanley and said, quit pushing. Lay off, said Armpit as he, Magnet, and X-Ray joined them. Why should he? Snapped X-Ray. Kingman's bigger. He can take care of himself. I don't want any trouble, Stanley said. Zigzag pushed him hard. Eat my cookie, he said. Stanley was glad to see Mr. Pendersky coming toward them along with Zero. Hi, Mom, said Armpit. We were fooling around. I saw what was going on, Mr. Pendersky said. He turned to Stanley. Go ahead, Stanley. He said, hit him back. You're bigger. And he stared at Mr. Pendersky in astonishment. Teach the bully a lesson, said Mr. Pendersky. Zigzag hit Stanley on the shoulder with his open hand. Teach me a lesson, he challenged. And he made a feeble attempt to punch Zigzag, then he left a very fit of fists against his head and neck. Zigzag had hold of his collar with one hand, was hitting him with the other. The collar ripped and Stanley fell backward into the dirt. That's enough, Mr. Pendersky yelled. It wasn't enough for Zigzag. He ran on top of Stanley. Stop, shouted Mr. Pendersky. The side of Stanley's hand was pressed flat against the dirt. He tried to protect himself as Zigzag's fist slammed off his arms and pounded his face into the ground. All he could do was wait for it to be over. Then suddenly Zigzag was off of him. Then he managed to look up, and he saw Zero and his arm around Zigzag's round neck. Zigzag made a gabbing sound as he desperately tried to pry Zero's arm off to him. You're going to kill him, shouted Mr. Pendersky. Zero kept squeezing. Armpit charged into them, freeing Zigzag from Zero's chokehold. The three boys fell to the ground in different directions. Mr. Pendersky fired his pistol into the air. The other counselor came running from the office. The tents were out on the lake. They had their guns drawn, but halted them when they saw the trouble was over. The warden walked over from her cabin. There was a riot, Mr. Pendersky told her. Zero almost strangled Ricky. The warden looked at Zigzag, who was still stretching and massaging his neck. Then she turned his attention to Stanley, who was obviously in the worst condition. What happened to you? Nothing. It was a riot. Zigzag was beating up the caveman, said Armpit. Then Zero started choking Zigzag, and I pulled Zero off Zigzag. It was all over before Mom fired his gun. They just got a little hot, that's all, said X-Ray. You know how it is. In a sun all day, people get hot, right? But everything's cool now. I see, the warden said. She turned to Zigzag. What's the matter? Didn't you get puffy for your birthday? Zig's just a little hot, said X-Ray. Out in the sun all day, you know how it is. Blood starts to boil. was that what happened, Zigzag? Asked Warden. Yeah, said Zigzag. Like X-ray said, working so hard in the sun while Cayman just sits around doing nothing, my blood boiled. Excuse me, said the Warden. Cayman digs his hole, just like everyone else. Zigzag shrugged sometimes. Excuse me, Gerald's been digging part of Cayman's hole every day, said Squid. The Warden looked from Squid to Stanley to Zero. I'm teaching him to read and write, said Stanley. It's short of a trade. The hole still gets dug, so what does it matter who digs it? Excuse me, said Warden. Isn't it important for him to learn to read? Stanley asked. Doesn't that build character more than digging holes? That's his character, said Warden. How about your character? And he raised and lowered one's shoulders. The Warden turned to Zero. Well, Zero, what have you learned so far? Zero said nothing. Have you been digging Kevin's hole for nothing? Warden asked him. He likes to dig holes, said Pendeski. Tell me what you learned yesterday, said Warden. Surely you can remember that. Zero said nothing. Mr. Pendeski laughed. He picked up a shovel and said, You might as well try to teach his shovel to read. It's got more brains than Zero. That's at sound, said Zero. The at sound, repeated the Warden. Well, then tell me, what does CAT spell? Zero glanced around uneasily. Sandy knew he knew the answer. Zero just didn't like answering questions. Cat, Zero said. Mr. Pendeski clapped his hand. Bravo, bravo, the boy's genius. FAT, asked Warden. Zero said nothing. Sandy hadn't taught him F sound yet. F. Zero said, whispered, fat. How about hat? Asked the HAT, asked the Warden. Stanley hadn't told him the H sound either. Zero constantly heard, then said chat. At all the counselors laughed. He's a genius, all right, said Mr. Pendeski. He's so stupid, he doesn't even know he's stupid. Stanley didn't know why Mr. Pendeski seemed to have it in from Zero. If Mr. Pendeski only thought about it, he had realized it was very logical for Zero to think the letter H made a CH sound. Okay, from now on, I don't want anyone digging anyone's else hole, said the Warden, and no more reading lessons. I'm not digging another hole, said Zero. Good, said Warden. She turned to Stanley. You know why you are digging holes? Because it's good for you. It teaches you a lesson. If Zero digs you a hole for you, then you are not learning your lessons, are you? I guess not, Stanley murmured, although he knew they weren't digging just to learn a lesson, just looking for something that belonged to Kiss and Kate Baldo. Why can't I dig my own hole, but still teach Cheryl to read? He asked. What's wrong with that? I'll tell you what's wrong with that, the Warden said. It leads to trouble. Cheryl almost killed Zigzag. It causes him stress, said Mr. Pendeski. I know you mean well, Stanley, but face it, Zero's too stupid to learn to read. That's what makes his blood boil, not the hot sun. I'm not digging another hole, said Zero. Mr. Pendeski handed him shovel. Here, take it, Zero. It's all you're ever good for. Zero took the shovel, then he swung it like a baseball bat. A metal blade smashed across Mr. Pendeski's face. His knees crumped beneath him. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. The counselors all drew their guns. Zero held the shovel out in front of him, as if he were going to try to bat away the bullets. I hate digging holes, he said. Then he slowly backed away. Don't shoot him, at the Warden. He can't go anywhere. The last thing we need is an investigation. Arrow kept backing up and out past the clutcher hole of the boys had been digging, the farther and farther out on the lake. He's going to have to come back for water, the Warden said. Stanley noticed Zero's canteen lying on the ground near his hole. A couple of counselors helped Mr. Pendeski to his feet onto the hole. And he looked out toward Zero, but he had disappeared into the haze. The Warden ordered the counselors to take turns guarding the shower room and rec room all day and all night. They were not to let Zero drink any water. When he returned, he was to brought directly to her. She examined her fingernails and said, "It's almost time for me to paint my nails again." Before she left, she told the 6 remaining members of Group D that she still expected 7 holes. Chapter 31. Stanley angrily dug his shovel into the dirt. He was angry at everyone else, Mr. Penetsky, the warden, the X-ray, and his no-good dirty pig-stealing great-great-grandfather. But mostly he was angry at himself. He knew he never should have let Zero dig part of the hole for him. He still could have taught him to read. If Zero could dig all day and still have a strength to learn, then he should have been able to dig all day and still have the strength to teach. What he should do, he thought, was go out after Zero, but he didn't. None of the others helped him dig Zero's hole, and he didn't expect them to. Zero had been helping him dig his hole. Now he had to dig Zero's. He remained out the lake, digging during the hottest part of the day, long after everyone else had gone it. He kept an eye out for Zero, but Zero didn't come back. It would have been easy to go out after Zero. There was nobody to stop him. He kept thinking that's what he should do. Maybe they could climb to the top of the big dam. It wasn't too far away, and if it really was the same place where his great-grandfather found refuge, and if after 100 years or so water was still there. It didn't seem likely, not when an entire lake had gone dry. And even if they did find refuge on Big Dam, he thought, they had still have to come back here eventually. Then they had both have to face the warden and her rattlesnake fingers. Instead, he came up a better idea, although he didn't have it quite all figured out yet. He thought that maybe he could make a deal with the warden. He had told her where he really found the gold tube if she wouldn't scratch Zero. He wasn't sure how he had made the deal without getting himself in deeper problem. She might just say, "Tell me where you found it or I will sketch you." Plus it would mean X-ray would get in trouble. She had probably scratched him up as well. X-ray would be out to get to him for the next 16 months. He dug his shovel into the dirt. By the next morning, Zero still hadn't returned, and Stanley saw one counselor sitting guards by the water spigot outside the shower wall. Mr. Penetsky had 2 black eyes and a bandage over his nose. "I always knew he was stupid," Stanley heard him say, and he was required to dig only 1 hole the next day. As he dug, he kept a constant watch out for Zero, but never saw him. Once again, he considered going out in the lake to look for him, but he began to realize that it was already too late. His only hope was that Zero had found God's thumb on his own. It wasn't impossible. His great-grandfather had found it. For some reason, his great-grandfather had felt the urge to climb the top of the mountain. Maybe Zero would feel the same urge. It was the same mountain, if water was still there. He tried to convince it wasn't impossible. There had been a storm just a few days ago. Maybe Big Dam was actually some kind of natural water tower that caught and stored the rain. It wasn't impossible. He returned to the tent to find the warden, Mr. Sir, and Mr. Penetsky all waiting for him. "Have you seen Zero?" the warden asked him. "No." "No sign of him at all?" "No." "Do you have any idea where he went?" "No." "You know you're not doing him any favors if you were lying," said Mr. Sir. "He can't survive out there for more than a day or 2. "I don't know where he is." All 3 stared at Stanley as if they were trying to figure out if he was telling the truth. Mr. Penetsky's face was so swollen he could barely open his eyes. They were just slits. "You sure he has no family?" the warden asked Mr. Penetsky. "He's ward of the state," Mr. Penetsky told her. "He was living on the street when he was arrested." "Is there anyone who might ask questions? Some social worker who took an interest in him?" "He had nobody," said Mr. Penetsky. "He was nobody?" The warden thought a moment. Okay, I want you to destroy all his records. Mr. Pendeski nodded. He was never here, said warden. Mr. Sir nodded. Can you get the state files from our computer? She asked Mr. Pendeski. I don't want anyone in the AG office to know he was here. I don't think I can erase him completely from all the state files, said Mr. Pendeski. Too many cross-references, but I can make it so it would to be very difficult for anyone to ever find a record of him. Like I said, though, no one will ever look. No one cares about Hector's irony. Good, said the warden. Chapter 32. 2 days later, a new kid was assigned to Group D. His name was Brian, but X-ray called him Twitch because he was always fidgeting. Twitch was assigned Zero's Bat and Zero's Kate. Vacancies don't last long at Camp Green Lake. Twitch had been arrested for stealing a car. He claimed he could break into the car, disconnect the alarm, and hotwire the engine all in less than a minute. I never planned to, steal one, he told them. But sometimes, I will be walking past a real nice car parked in a deserted area, and I will just start twitching. If you think I twitch now, you should see me when I'm around a car. The next thing I know, I'm behind the wheel. Penny lay on his scratchy sheets. It occurred to him that his coat no longer smelled bad. He wondered if the smell had gone away or if he had just gotten used to it. Hey Cayman, said Twitch, do we really have to get up at 4:30? You get used to it, Stanley told him. It's the coolest part of the day. He tried not to think about Gerald. It was too late. Either he had made it a victim or what worried him the most, however, wasn't that it was too late. What he worried him the most, what really ate at his inside, was the fear that it wasn't too late. What if Sarah was still alive, desperately crawling across the dirt, searching for water? He tried to force the image out of his mind. The next morning out of the lake, Stanley listened as Mr. Sir to switch the requirements of his hole as wide and as deep as your shovel. Twitch fidgeted, his finger thumped against the wooden shaft of his shovel, and his neck moved from side to side. You won't be twitching so much after digging all day, Mr. Sir told him. You won't get the strength to wriggle your pinky. He popped some sunflower seeds in his mouth. Defiantly chewed him, then spat out of the chills. This isn't a Girl Scout camp. The water truck came shortly after sunrise. Stanley got in line behind Magnet and ahead of Twitch. What if it's not too late? He watched Mr. Sir film X-Ray's canteen. The image of Zero crawling across the hot dirt remained in his head. But what could he do about it? Even if Zero was somehow alive, after more than 4 days, how would Stanley ever find him? It would take days. He had needed a car or a pickup truck with a tank of water in the back. And he wondered if Mr. Sir had left the keys in the ignition. He slowly backed away from the line to circle over to the side of the truck. He looked through the window. The keys were there dangling in the ignition, and he felt his fingers start to twitch. He took a deep breath to steady himself and tried to think clearly. He had never driven before, but how hard could it be? This is really crazy, he told himself. Whatever he did, he knew he have to do it quickly before Mr. Sir noticed. It's too late, he told himself. Darrow couldn't have survived. But what if it wasn't too late? He took another long deep breath. Think about this, he told himself, but there wasn't time to think. He flung open the door of the truck and climbed quickly inside. Hey, shouted Mr. Sir. He turned the key and stepped at the gas pedal. The engine revived. The truck didn't move. He pressed the pedal on the floor. The engine rolled, but the truck was motionless. Mr. Sir came running along the side of the truck. The door was still open. Put it in the gear, shouted Twitch. The gear shift was on the floor next to the ship. said. Stanley pulled the level black until the arrow pointed to the letter D for drive. The trunk lurched forward, and he jerked back against the seat and tightly gripped the wheel as the truck accelerated. His foot was pressed to the floor. The truck went faster and faster across the dry lake bed. He bounced over a pile of dirt. Suddenly, Stanley was slammed forward. Then he suddenly backward as an airbag exploded in his face. He fell out on the open door and into the ground. He had driven straight into a hole. He lay on the dirt, staring at the truck with stock lopsided into the ground. He sighed. He couldn't blame his no-good, rotten pig stealing great-grandfather this time. This time it was his own fault. 100%. He had probably just done the stupidest thing he had ever done in his short and miserable life. He managed to get to his feet. He was sore, but he didn't think he had broken any bones. He glanced back at Mr. Sir, who remained where he was, staring at Stanley. He ran. His canteen was strapped around his neck. He banged against his chest as he ran, and every time it hit against him, reminded him that it was empty, empty, empty. Flower seeds. He didn't know if he might find something to put in it. After a while, he thought he could make out the shape of the mountain through the haze. At first, he wasn't sure if this was another kind of mirage, but the farther he walked, the clearer they came into view. Almost straight ahead of him, he could see what looked like a fist, with a thumb sticking up. He didn't know how far it was, 5 miles, 50 miles. One thing was certain, it was more than halfway. He kept walking toward it, although he didn't know why. He knew that he have to turn around before he got there, but every time he looked at it, seemed to encourage him, giving him the thumbs up sign. As he continued walking, he became aware of a large object on the lake. He couldn't tell what it was, or even if it was natural or man-made. It looked a little like a fallen tree, although it didn't seem likely that a tree would grow here. More likely, it was a ridge of dirt or rocks. The object, whatever it was not on the way to victim, but off to the right. He tried to decide whether to go to it or continue toward victim, or maybe just turn around. There was no point in heading toward victim, he decided. He would never make it. For all he knew, it was like chasing the moon, but he could make it to the mysterious object. He changed direction. He doubted as anything but the face that there was something in the middle of all the nothing made it hard for him to pass up. He decided to make the object his halfway point, and he hoped he hadn't already gone too far. He left himself when he saw what it was. It was a boat, or part of a boat anyway. It struck him as funny to see a boat in the middle of the dry and barren wasteland, but after all he realized this was once a lake. The boat lay upside down, half buried in the dirt. Someone may have drowned here, he thought grimly, at the same spot where he could very well die or thirst. The name on the boat had been painted on the back. The upside-down red letters was peeled and faded, but Stanley could still read the name Mary Lou. On one side of the boat there was a pile of dirt and a tunnel leading down below the boat. The tunnel looked big enough for the good-sized animal to crawl through. He heard the noise. Something stirred under the boat. It was coming out. "Hey!" Stanley shouted, hoping to scare it back inside. His mouth was very dry, so it was hard to shout very loudly. "Hey!" the thing answered weakly. Then a dark hand on the orange sleeve reached out the tunnel. Daryl's face looked like a jack-o'-lantern that had been left out too many days past Halloween. Half-rotten with sunken eyes and dropping smile. "Is that water?" he asked. His voice was weak and raspy. His lips were so pale they were almost white, and his tongue seemed to flop around uselessly in his mouth as he spoke. as if it kept getting in the way. It's empty, said Stanley. He stared at Zero, not quite believing that he was real. I tried to bring you a whole water jar, but he smiled shiftily. I dropped it into a hole. I can't believe you're me neither, said Zero. Come on, we got to get back to camp. Zero shook his head. I'm not going back. You have to. We both have to. You want some sploosh? Zero asked. What? Zero shaded his eyes with the forearm. It's cooler under the boat, he said, and he watched Zero crawl back into his hole. It was a miracle he was still alive, but Stanley knew he would have to get him back to camp soon, even if he had to carry him. He crawled after him and was just able to squeeze his body through the hole. He never would have fit when he first came to Camp Green Lake. He had lost a lot of weight. As he pulled himself through, his legs struck something sharp and hard. It was a shovel. For a second, Stanley wondered how it got here, but then remembered that Barrow had taken it from him after striking Mr. Pendeski. It was cooler under the boat, which was half buried in the dirt. There were enough cracks and holes in the bottom of the boat, now the roof, to provide light and ventilation. He could see empty jars scattered around. Harold held the jar in the hand and grunted as tried to unscrew the lid. What is it? Sploosh. His voice was strained as he worked for the jar. That's what I called. They was buried under the boat. He still couldn't get the lid though. I found 16 jars here. They hand me the shovel, and he didn't have a lot of room to move. He reached to behind him, grabbed the wooden end of the shovel, and had held it out to Zero. Blade first. Sometimes you just have to, Zero said, then hit the jar and blade the shovel, breaking the top of the jar clean off. He quickly brought the jar to his mouth and licked the splush off the jar edges before it spilled. Chapter 33. He slowed to walk as far as he could tell. Nobody was chasing him. He could hear voices coming from back of 잠시만요.